الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم بارك لنا في جمعنا هذا، اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مباركا مرحوما، واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما، ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان، اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا، وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان، واجعلنا من عبادك الراشدين. اللهم ربنا بارك لنا بارك لنا في أعمالنا وفي أعمالنا وفي أرزاقنا وأهلنا وذوينا وأحبابنا، واجعل لنا من كل ضيق مخرجا ومن كل هم فرجا، واجعل لنا من بعد العسر يسرا. اللهم فك الكرب عن كل مكروب من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم فك البلاء عن كل مبتلى من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم اشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين، اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا الذين سبقونا إليك، واجعل آخر كلامنا من الدنيا لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله. أمتنا عليها وأحينا عليها، واحشرنا في زمرة حبيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وأسقنا من يده الشريفة شربة لا نظمأ بعدها أبدا. Oh Allah, we call upon you, we pray to you, we beseech you, we ask you by your names and attributes to bless this gathering and to bless this space and to make it a place of dhikr, a place of ibadah, a place of talab ilm, a place of seeking knowledge, and a place of activism. We ask you to bless us and to bless our families and our community, to fill our hearts with your abundant mercy and to fill our homes with your abundant mercy, and to help us navigate through the difficulties and trials of life, and to make the best of our actions the last of our actions, the best of our days the last of our days, and the best of all days the day we meet you and you're pleased with us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Ameen, ameen, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair for attending, and it's been a few weeks. We've had honored and esteemed guests, alhamdulillah, for the past few weeks. And it's good to be back with you guys, and inshallah we decided to start it off with a Q&A. And as Akhi Na'il mentioned, please start asking your questions through the tools that we have, and we'll start them. But I think we wanted to make some announcements first, right?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. So there are a couple events happening this weekend, inshallah. So tomorrow there is a Quran competition at ICPC Patterson from 1 to 5 p.m. And also there's the monthly book club event happening tomorrow at ICPC Patterson with Sheikh Qatanani and Sheikh Osamah. The book that we'll be discussing is the FAQ on parenting. And then this Sunday at this masjid, inshallah, from 5:30 to 7:30, we have our monthly community hub event. It's going to be a family trivia night where there will be questions on the prophets Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidina Musa. So we encourage everybody to come with their families for this fun event, inshallah. So with that, we can get started with the questions.
By the way, there's 3 questions from here. You have both in front of you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the questions are coming in. So let me just go through.
Assalamu alaikum. Sheikh, this is a good one. Might take a little bit. What are the practical steps to become close to Allah?
Jazakallah khair. What are the practical steps to become close to Allah Azza wa Jal? I think a good way to start is by highlighting the roadmap they set for the spiritual journey. Sisters, please, if you could just stay with us. Jazakumullah khair. The roadmap for the spiritual journey, they say, is divided into 3 levels. The first of them is takhalli, is ridding the soul of any elements of toxicity that corrupt it, spiritual diseases, ruling that out of the heart. And as the first step in the process, that means getting rid of things like bad assumptions, envy, arrogance, ostentation, and the rest of the diseases. If I do that as a first step, it'll give me some sense of spiritual clarity. I'll be able to experience the beauty of worship. So that's why the second step is tahalli, is to beautify the soul with acts of worship. If my heart is toxic and it's rife with sin, there's no way I'm going to be able to benefit from reading the Quran, making dua, praying. The benefit of that is going to be very minimal. And that's why they say, اتق المحارم تكن أعبد الناس. If you really want to become the most devout of people, then avoid what's haram. That'll be your en route to being close to Allah Azza wa Jal. Make sure you give the responsibilities and the rights, especially when it relates to the rights of others, because that's top priority. And so that the second step in the process is, like we said, tahalli. So first one's takhalli, ridding the heart of toxins and toxicity. Second one is beautifying it. And then the third one is tajalli. Tajalli is getting a level of spiritual awareness, that the individual becomes aware of his thoughts, becomes aware of his actions, and becomes someone who has this sixth sense, so to say. So I would say that this is the best roadmap to get closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. Rid yourself of the harms, of the sins, of the sinfulness, of any dhulm or oppression of another human being, and then experience the beauty of worship. Allahu Alam.
Barakallah feek. I hear a lot of people ask this question. They say, is it better to stop doing the bad deeds, or is it better to increase the good deeds? I think you kind of answered it, but could you reiterate that point?
Is it better to stop the bad deeds or increase the good deeds? So the word increase gives me the impression that good deeds are being done. Because if good deeds weren't being done, then that would be bad deeds, right? So increase the good deeds means that there's some extra there. So of course the priority is dar al-mafasid. Actually this is, by the way, this is a principle that they use for a host of issues in fiqh. Is dar al-mafasid muqaddamun ala jalb al-masalih. To do away with harm takes precedence over bringing benefit, meaning that the top priority is la darara wa la dirar, is that there should be no harm and there should be no no toxicity. Removing that, it takes priority over all things. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. One question came in regards to a couple where both parties are working, both the couple's working, and the question is about how should the couple arrange finances when both parties are working?
How should couples arrange finances when both couples are working?
I think what they're trying to say is like both parents are working, so how should they arrange their finances? What should their financial arrangements be?
So the first straightforward answer is bitaradi, is by mutual agreement. And of course that's the answer to most things relating to marriage. Most things relating to marriage are in the realm of mutual agreement. Meaning that you can't enforce the black and white, the boundaries of law, if both parties are not willing. Because that's what makes a marriage work, when you have willing parties. Yeah, something might be wrong, something might be right, but you don't have a willingness to uphold that. Then where are you going to get? You could say halal or haram or wajib or makruh all you want, but if there isn't mutual consent, then it's going to be a glaring problem. So often, many things are absolutely justified, but they would ruin a marriage. So we would say, you should not do those things, although they're justified. Jazakumullah khair. You should not do those things, although they're justified, because preserving your marriage is paramount. And sometimes people get tunnel visioned in this regard. Very, very, very foolish behavior. This is my right and I don't care, I'm not going to give up my right. This is going south because he or she is not giving me my rights and what I deserve. Go cry your rights day and night. If you're not able to win over the heart of the other party, then khalas, it's going to end in divorce. That's how it's going to happen. Anyway, getting back to your point here, it needs to be known, the following needs to be known. The responsibility of financial support, Islamically speaking, is the responsibility of the husband. That's the responsibility shar'an. And that's the first step to this discussion. What that means is, what the woman gives in terms of the basic needs in the home is considered a charity. And of course, giving a charity is a great act of benevolence. That's beautiful, that's nice, that's rewarding. She'll get hasanat for that. That's good. However, on the same token, if people want to live according to certain standards, then obviously they might need to sacrifice for that. So if you have someone, if we could just stop the side discussions, it's kind of distracting me, please, on both sides. And the children, if we could keep them downstairs. Jazakumullah khair. When it comes to the required allowance, like if you have someone who makes 100K a year, for example, 100K a year, and we choose a standard of living as a family that exceeds 100K, then of course, how's he going to pay for it by himself, right? So that's the trade-off. Woman doesn't have to spend towards the home, but then at the same time, I don't need to live beyond my means. So these are the two realities I need to reconcile. Now, one of the awful things that would happen from a negative understanding is, and this happens sometimes, where the husband somehow thinks that he has ownership over his wife's income. And there's absolutely nothing to justify that Islamically. It's just absolute dhulm and oppression, where the husband thinks he could take the paycheck directly and do with it as he sees fit. If she gives that to him willingly, that's a different story. But for the husband to think that he has that shar'i right, that's absolutely false. But at the same time, again, you need to balance those things. If we're going to be a dual income family so that we can possibly live according to a more comfortable standard, that's a mutual choice we make, right? So this is, I hope it's a little clear, the balance that there is. We want to live more comfortably, then hey, yeah, maybe we both have to contribute. We want to go according to the actual letter of the law. No, when the woman contributes, it's a charity and the husband's responsible. So that's the balance, wallahu alam. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Another question related to marriage, but through a different lens. Someone has been looking to get married for a while now. They're asking if there's a specific dua they can recite.
Specific dua. There's no specific dua that I know of from the sunnah for marriage. However, I think in general, doing the common ad'iyah or the common adhkar that have blanket benefits across the board. Take a look at this. So for example, Salah al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us in the hadith that one of the blessings of kathrat as-salah al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that you'll be relieved of your concerns and your sins will be forgiven. This is about the hadith. It's a very well-known hadith. That man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, I make for you a fourth of my prayers. So how much should I do? And then he said, as you wish, and if you were increased, that's fine. And then he kept on increasing it until he said, I'll make for you my entire prayers. أجعل لك صلاتي كلها. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, إذن تكفى همك ويغفر ذنبك. So something like that, if you're a person who's seeking chastity and iffah and afaf and you're trying to find a way to live in a halal reality, then I don't doubt that even doing something like a salah ala Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam would help in that regard. Doing something like serving others and helping others brings immense forms of barakah. It doesn't bring one form of barakah. Because sometimes being single could be an extreme bala, an extreme trial in avoiding haram. The Prophet ﷺ says, "Idfa'u al-bala'a bis-sadaqah." This is general trials and affliction. Push away trials and affliction by giving charities. Now, whoever thought that maybe giving a charity might help me in something as basic as the need for a righteous spouse? I absolutely think it relates to it. And not only that, not just giving charities, but also giving from your time, serving the khalq, khidmatul khalq. All of this brings immense forms of barakah to yourself, to your future progeny, and to your family. Wallahu a'lam. This is what I would say for that regard.
Barakallahu feek. First, a comment. You can thumbs up some questions. If there's a question that's interesting to you, thumbs it up. It'll come to the top and we'll see it quicker. So the more people that like a specific question, we'll get to that question earlier.
All of you could scan this and do that, like he's saying. Just scan it with your phone. And if you see a question that... Yeah, Sheikh.
You don't need the app. You could just probably open it up on
If any of you guys are also on the group, the Friday Forum group, then you could also do it there.
So one question that suddenly got 4 likes in the past second.
MashaAllah.
Is it allowed in Islam to have a prenuptial agreement?
The answer is yes. Of course you can have a prenuptial agreement. Seems like the question before the last scared a lot of people. It's on a lot of people's minds. Can you have a prenuptial agreement? Yeah, absolutely. What could be included in that prenuptial agreement? A number of different types of things. In terms of your assets and your properties before marriage, your money earned after marriage. But by the way, prenuptial agreements are tricky. You need to make sure that you get them done the right way. You need to have a lawyer that reviews it, because it's not an open-ended, legal document that could be used in any way at any time. Some of them have a certain time limitation to them, and some prenuptial agreements might be valid in one state and not in another. So you really need to consult a lawyer on this type of issue. But in general, if you're talking about parties that fear Allah, then the boundaries of Sharia and what the rights that are due for each party at the time of divorce are known, and they're settled upon and figured out through divorce settlements. But the problem is, you really don't know who's going to fear Allah at the time of divorce. Someone might be absolutely pious and God-fearing, into the end of it in the very beginning, but when it comes to divorce, sometimes it brings out the absolute worst in people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help us with our shortcomings. Allahumma ameen.
The next question. We are getting closer to the Christian holiday, and I'd like some suggestions on how not to be rude but politely address their greetings, Merry Christmas, etc.
So, this is always a question that's usually asked around this time. And I really think sometimes it's the relevance of some of these questions varies based on how much people interact with people of other faiths. Some people are always in that mix, especially our convert brothers and sisters or reverts. They're always in this mix, having to deal with even some things that are more involved, like attending family gatherings that are going to have alcohol, that are going to have pork or whatnot, or what should I do in that type of situation in terms of exchanging gifts. Sometimes I'm not that much in the mix and I don't need to go full blown on all these issues. So some of these fatwa that we give would vary, and this is really important to note. I hope you guys pay attention to this. Fatwa considers circumstance. So fiqh is a more of a theoretical way to address law. It's just the adillah, the evidences, the Quran, the hadith, the qiyas, the whatnot. But when you come to fatwa, I need a live circumstance in front of me, a live person in front of me, because what I would say to person A might not be the same as what I would say to person B. And that's not because the truth changes from person to person, but that's because there is a certain element of flexibility to consider extenuating circumstances in our deen. This is part of the magnificence of Sharia. Alhamdulillah that Allah Azza wa Jal gave us a deen that's not set in stone, that absolutely has no consideration for the lives of people. Alhamdulillah that Allah did not put us in that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us so much in terms of the dynamic nature of Sharia. So one of those, I'll give you an example. one of those considerations that I would give, or scholars would give, I should say, when speaking to someone who's new to the deen, is to make sure to the full extent that they don't alienate their family. The worst thing a new revert could possibly do, or someone who came to the, or someone who chose to get married to a, because by the way, someone who gets married to a sister who reverted to Islam might have to deal with some of these realities, right? Dealing with her family. The worst thing you could do is absolutely alienate the family and make them hate and detest what Islam has done to their son or daughter. That's not something that we search for. So that's why in some of these questions, we try our best to get our revert brothers and sisters to do their best to accommodate their family while living up to the principles of the deen. Yeah, I'm going to preserve my deen. I'm not going to just completely submit and give the green light for everything. But at the same time, I'm going to make sure that the person on the other side, my family, doesn't grow a sense of dislike to me and my Islam. So this is key. But for those who aren't in that type of situation, there would be a different rhetoric. There would be a rhetoric that is more in line with, hey, you know what? It's okay that we're different. It's okay that we're different. It's okay that we're different, and we should respect our differences. And I, as a Muslim, don't submit to the culture that Christmas represents. I don't submit to that culture. So I would say happy holidays. Why not? Why do I have to say something more than that? I give the recognition, hey, happy holidays. Winter break has a whole bunch of different holidays, vacations and whatnot. I don't need to become I don't need to start attending Christmas parties. It's okay if my co-workers realize that, hey, there's certain things in my Islam that aren't okay. I shouldn't be on a table that has wine on it. I shouldn't be at a party where people are getting drunk. I shouldn't be in that type of environment, and that's okay. Because I would even do that with my Muslim brothers and sisters. If I get invited to a party that way exceeds the bounds of Sharia and everything that it entails, I'm going to set boundaries. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that you would find people respect you a whole lot more when you're a person who lives up to your principles and values. Wallahu alam. That's what I would say to that. So again, just to summarize the answer, not everyone in terms of this type of question is the same across the board. I would say certain things to people who are in special circumstances that give special accommodation to their families within certain boundaries. But the average Muslim who is not in that type of situation, I would tell them, hey, you know what? It's okay. Live up to your principles. Set boundaries for your Islam. Make sure you don't allow yourself to be pulled into certain things that are really questionable. Wallahu alam.
Barakallah feek, Shaykhi. The next question, how can we approach our friendships with Muslims who are a part of the LGBTQ plus community?
MashaAllah. Heavy hitters. So how can we what? One more time.
How can we approach our friendships with Muslims who are part of the LGBT community?
With Muslims who are part of the LGBT community?
I mean, this could mean two things. It could mean one, they support the movement, or they could identify as part of the movement. So maybe it's a two-parter.
Yeah, I know. And I know we have both situations. Look, this is, again, this is another situation where we need to be clear on principles. Because, especially when you get involved in politics, it's easy for those principles and those boundaries to completely wither away. And some of the discourse that's around this is, hey, they're supporting Palestine and they're supporting our causes, we should support theirs too. And if you don't support the cause of one minority, you might as well not support the cause of any. We're all in this together, and so on and so forth. And then what you find in the process is we get lost, between what our deen says and what people are actually doing on the ground. So I think in this type of situation, there needs to be a nuanced approach. We need to be very clear that there are certain things that are not okay in terms of what I believe in. On the other hand, I'm never going to lose sight of the humanity of anyone who chooses to do any certain actions for themselves. I realize that people have a choice to make in their lives, and I can't compel them. I don't have that right and that power to compel people. Everyone's going to make their choice. But at the same time, I don't need to necessarily go on along with them for the ride. That's the distinction. I respect, I show courtesy, I humanize people, and when possible, but again, when possible, very delicately and thoughtfully consider when can we be involved in a coalition. Because sometimes when it's happening from Muslims who don't have any idea of their principle, the principles of their deen and their values and their value system, it could get really messy. It could get very confused. And this happens sometimes on some college campuses through MSAs, and when they decide to join a coalition with people with different ideologies and beliefs and moral values, and many people get lost in the mix. And that's why we're dealing with a reality where people are coming to us with all kinds of questions. Why would a merciful God punish people just because of what they like? It's not fair. This person's a good guy. This person's she's a good girl. Why would God hate people for the way they were created? And then you find all these shubuhat, endless shubuhat, for the way they were created, quote unquote. That's what they say. Right? That's not what I'm saying. But the end to this is, look, the end to all of this, and this is just an advice for every person, every young person, and every person in general, but especially young people, and especially young people who are activists and getting involved. Learn about your deen. That's the real culprit here. That's the real problem. When we don't know enough about our Islam, everything will pull us in each direction, right or left. If I don't have clear understanding of what my deen says in terms of aqeedah, in terms of the Qur'an, in terms of fiqh, in terms of kada, then I'm going to be mutadhabdhib. I'm going to be dragged. Wherever the wind blows me, I'm going to go. So that's how I would advise in that. We need to be very thoughtful and careful about who we stand alongside politically, socially. And then also, we can never allow ourselves to promote something that goes fundamentally against our deen. That's what I would say. While humanizing people and respecting them and showing regard for their humanity all along the way. Yeah, Wallahu alam.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Just to switch topics, there's one question regarding how can we get our sisters to wear the hijab in a respectful and modest way. And they're just making a comment in terms of that their sisters are being lost in the trend and they're not wearing the hijab properly.
Okay, so this got high votes? Well, this is Google Voice.
This is Google Voice.
Oh, okay. We didn't get to vote on it here. The question is, who's asking? Is it a brother? I think a lot of the sisters would get mad. But anyway, point is, how do you get our sisters to wear hijab in the right way?
Correct.
Because there is a trend, what? Say it again?
There seems to be following like just the trends.
They seem to just be following the trends. Look, I'll zoom out a little bit. Because when you zoom in, sometimes it raises sensitivities and it makes people unnecessarily unwilling to hear. So I'll zoom out a little bit. When people are in any compromised way when it comes to the rulings of the Islam, you need to see where it fits on the greater spectrum of priorities. Where does it fit? If I'm talking about someone, this is the craziness here. If I'm talking about someone, please, guys, there's so much noise coming from this side. If you guys could please just stay along with me, I'd really appreciate it. So here, if I'm talking about someone who doesn't pray, and I'm going to come and emphasize the subject of hijab, I'm a fool. That's like saying, I want someone to get their broken arm addressed while they're in the middle of having a heart attack. Heart failure, kidney disease, whatever it might be, and you're comparing a broken arm to kidney disease. Would anyone do that? And with any person with any sense, it doesn't mean the subject of hijab is not important. Of course it's important. But akhuna or ukhtna, in this case ukhtna, la tusalli. She doesn't pray. Same thing I would say to our dear brother. If I'm talking about a brother, sometimes I get these types of questions where, like I got this, I get this a lot. I've gotten it in the past. Someone would want How can I give da'wah to my brother who listens to music and he's just like all around far away from the masjid, and I want him to come closer, and I tell him that music's haram, but he just doesn't listen to me, and so on and so forth. And then the conversation takes us a little further. Where's his heart in terms of Allah? Does he pray? Does he love Allah? Does he feel the need to turn to Allah? If the answer is no, then you have your answer right there. Please stop it with the batikh debates that happen on the side. Sometimes, I'm serious. Some of the things that happen in gatherings are absolutely nonsensical. You find people debating about Sunni and Shia and they don't pray. Ya akhi, what are you talking about? The guy, he's an expert on how the Shia are a deviant sect and he doesn't pray. Wallahi, there's people like this. There's situations like this, brothers and sisters. I'm not making this up. Debating endlessly about political realities overseas, yet he doesn't give the haqq of his children, or she doesn't give the haqq of her children, or so on and so forth. If it's usually about politics, I'm talking about mostly guys, but anyway, that's a generalization. But anyway, whatever. The point is, I need to look at things through a lens of priorities. There's a reason why Meccan revelation is different than Medinan revelation. Right? Medinan revelation is all about the details of law. Meccan revelation was about establishing iman in the hearts of people. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go reinvent the cycle. We can't reinvent Mecca and Medina. But I need to learn how to give da'wah. Right? And to be honest, if I approach my sister who's not wearing hijab in the right way, and she's doing many other good things, then I might lose her in the process. And there's no one to blame but myself. Because sometimes the reality is flipped. And again, this is not an argument against hijab. This is actually a call to realize priorities. Because sometimes the argument's flipped. That you find everything is wrong about the sister except hijab. She wears the hijab beautifully, but she gossips, backbites, doesn't pray. Yeah, doesn't pray. Some people wear hijab and they don't pray. Believe it or not. Yeah, some people wear hijab and they don't pray. So I need to understand priorities. And I need to, based on that, delicately approach people in a loving way. Build bonds and relationships with them. And that's how, wallahu alam, you'll be able to inspire your sisters.
Barakallahu feek. The next question has a lot of likes. Salam Shaykhi, is touching a pig haram? A lot of likes.
Is touching a pig haram? Only if you lick your fingers after. Look, the pig is an animal. And as an animal it has rights. As an animal it's a respected creation of Allah. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to own it. But if there's some situation, you went to the zoo, مش عارف ايه, and your 3-year-old wants to pet the pig, they're not going to go to Jahannam, inshallah. They're going to go, Allah.
Okay, this is one of the first questions. Are we allowed to buy negative interest rate bonds, lend 100% or 100 cents, receive 99 back later, losing $1 instead of gain? German government bonds were like this in 2016.
Negative bonds, what?
Yeah, negative interest bonds. So instead of having a positive interest rate, you'd have negative. So if you have a 0% interest rate, let's say on a car mortgage, it's actually the bank giving the car company like Toyota negative 2%. So they make that 2% on the back end. It's kind of flipped.
I don't know about this, negative interest bonds. This is the first time I hear about it. But in general, the bonds market is problematic. So just as you can't take riba, you can't give riba either. So I would need to understand what the structure of this is a little bit better. But in general, the bonds market is problematic because the profit in it is from loans. And any loan that incurs any type of profit is going to be a form of riba. And just as it's haram to take riba, it's haram to also give riba. Yeah.
Barakallahu feek. The next question is, what is the ruling on masturbation?
What's the ruling on masturbation? It is haram. The ruling of masturbation is haram, according to the vast majority of scholars. What type of sin is it? It's a minor sin, it's not a major sin. So, but minor is in a sense that, so what's a minor sin and what's a major sin? A major sin is something that there is wa'id about, meaning that there is a warning of hellfire, a warning of punishment in hellfire, or there is the mention of la'nah and damnation in the hadith. That's a major sin. A minor sin is something that doesn't have that. And a minor sin is only minor in that regard. However, whenever you look at the one who you disobeyed, you always see it as major. Because minor sin, sometimes when you say minor sin, some people undermine it. Oh, yani, it's okay, yani, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like zina. Yeah, of course it's not like zina. But is it an aberrancy to human nature? Yeah. Could it be absolutely destructive to your mind and to your body and to your emotional state? Yeah. Could it lead to other toxic behaviors? Absolutely yes. It is a gateway, a major gateway to all kinds of fasad and corruption. First step masturbation, second step pornography, and then third step beyond that is other sexual addictions.
Just a reminder, you guys, the questions are getting, there's a lot, so you could scroll through them, like the ones that you like, because there's definitely a lot of good stuff here. So I'll try to get to the ones that are most liked, and if I see anything else that's interesting or follows up on something we asked about, I'll also try to get to it.
You're following that one too, right? Okay.
How do you keep motivated to keep making the same dua, but still don't see an answer? Is there any advice on having tawakkul about it?
How do you get motivated to keep making the same dua?
So if I make the same dua several times, I don't see an answer, what do I do? Is there tawakkul? Is dua answered in many ways?
Look, it's a good idea to always keep your dua as universal as possible. When you start asking Allah Azza wa Jal for certain material things, sometimes you might be shooting yourself in the leg, because you really don't know if those things are good for you. That's like the brother who is really interested in a sister, and he starts seeing that his whole world revolves around this marriage working, and I keep on making dua, oh Allah, please let me get married to fulana, oh Allah, please let me, and he has a lot of khushu' in it, and he's crying, and he's doing istikhara every day, I want to get married to fulana, and then it doesn't work out, and then he gets angry at Allah. And he doesn't realize that perhaps if he got married to fulana, it would have been so much more different than what he anticipated. Or, same thing with people in their careers and their jobs and their schooling. Sometimes I don't know what's in the best interest for me. And so that's how I would start answering this. Are you making a particular worldly dua, hoping that Allah will make it happen? Then maybe you need to reconsider making this dua. Maybe it's not meant for it to happen. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by not answering this prayer for you, is saving you from some things that you never anticipated. Now the second step is, if it's not like that, if it's actually a universal dua, or something that is utterly good and cannot be bad, or cannot have, like for example, if you're asking that Allah relieve you from some trial or affliction that has befallen you, or help remove some feeling of stress or depression that you feel inside, then sometimes the solution to this type of problem is not a dua. Let me say that again. Certain problems, their solution is not a dua. You'll continue to make dua, keep doing dua. I'm not saying don't do dua. But some problems, they need to be resolved by resolving their stressors. Right? Like that's like someone like, oh, I've been making dua constantly for Allah to help me with this addiction I have, and I don't know, I just keep on falling back into it, and I just feel so bad. I'm making a lot of dua and praying a lot of salah. Why isn't Allah answering me? Why isn't Allah helping me out of this situation? The answer to this person is, hey, you got to figure out the stressors that are leading down this addiction, whatever it is, a sexual addiction like masturbation or pornography or whatever, or a drug addiction like marijuana or something else. If there are certain stressors, what are stressors? What do I mean? Certain realities you put yourself in, certain companionship you have, or certain free time that ends up ruining you and taking you down a negative path. Those are the types of things that need to be addressed. You could keep on making dua until you're blue. If you don't get the help you need to resolve an addiction, it's not going to get solved. So that's to answer that question. But if it's not an addiction, it's something else, then hey, the mu'min always perceives the answering of prayers in a few different possibilities. Either Allah gives it to you in your dunya, or He protects you from a harm like it, or He preserves it for you in your akhirah. And this is how the believer perceives dua. So sometimes you don't get what you asked for. You don't always get what you ask for. Wallahu a'lam.
Another question is regarding prayer. So what do you do if you have a hard time praying and if you feel like you're losing connection with Allah?
What do you do if you are having a hard time praying and losing connection with Allah? Yani you're having a hard time sticking with the fard, or it doesn't specify, right? So look, what can you do if you're having a hard time praying? First off, you can start trying to find certain meaning in prayer that perhaps you don't have yet. Maybe I need to explore some of the deeper meanings of prayer. What does ruku' mean? What does sujood mean? How can I maximize the benefit? What's the significance behind prostrating before Allah Azza wa Jal? Maybe I could start thinking about some of the symbolism that is involved in prayers. That's one avenue. Another avenue is to find khushu' during salah. There are certain things I need to be doing outside of salah. Like straight up, someone who's doing sinful behavior or oppressive behavior is not someone who's going to find khushu' in their salah. They're not going to. And khushu' is not about like a certain facial expressions or certain movements. That's not what it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. Take a look at this ayah. Note this. Allah is telling us that khushu', which we use for concentration in prayers, devotion in prayers, is actually a lifestyle. It's not something you do inside of prayers alone. Khushu' is something you live by. So that means for me to find sweetness in prayer, I need to be doing certain things outside of prayer. And part of that is avoiding sins. Part of it is also praying at the beginning of its time, training myself to do that. Just as I train myself with physical training or going to the gym or certain regiments I do, same way, praying in the first part of the time, praying in jama'ah. You know what? Taking that time between adhan and iqamah. All of this, having khushu' in wudu' before I have khushu' in salah. All of these are easy steps that you could take to find khushu' during prayers. But the bigger question is, am I living a life of khushu' outside of prayers or not? If the answer is no, then that's where the problem lies. So how can I find better khushu' in prayers? Let me take those steps and see where it leads me. There's a reason why wudu' is not an outer function. It's actually an inward function. The procedures are outward, but the feeling of wudu' is inward. What do I mean by that? The Prophet ﷺ tells us when the believer washes his face, the sins relating to the face exit. When the believer washes his arms and feet, the sins relating to those limbs exit. Meaning that I'm actually spiritually preparing myself for salah before I'm actually physically preparing it. So that's where khushu' starts. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallah feek. This is a question, I think it's a follow-up based on the August Friday forum about marriage with Sheikh Yasir. There's a few questions, I'm jumbling them together. There's a two-parter and then a follow-up to it. In August, during a Friday forum speaking about marriage, Sheikh Osamah, you mentioned that one should not create an emotional attachment during the Fatiha. If that's the case, then what is the Fatiha's purpose, and how can someone know they want to marry someone if they don't create an attachment pre-kitab? And then connected to that is, in terms of an engagement, how do you interact, talk with your fiancé in a way that's acceptable and halal?
Okay, those are good questions. I'm going to come back to you for the second question because I didn't quite hear it. I was focusing on the first one. So the emotional attachment. This is, how can you know if someone's good for you if you don't develop an emotional attachment for them? perhaps the person's not really understanding what we mean by emotional attachment. Now, when you come to marry someone, look, in our belief, happiness is something that you find within. That's first step. It's not something that someone gives to you. If I'm waiting for fulan or fulana to make me happy, I'll never be happy. This is absolutely critical to understand. Happiness is something I need to earn on my own before and leading up to and throughout marriage. Step one. Step two is we believe that love is something cultivated. It's not something that descends from the heavens, right? It doesn't, any feeling that people think is love prior to marriage is what we call infatuation. And infatuation is that I am, utterly interested and like fixated on a person. That's what it is. It's not love yet, because love is something that is deeper. Infatuation is something that easily withers away. Oh yeah, I wished it worked out. She seemed like a good girl, but hey, I'll find someone else. That's infatuation. Love is something that's built through sacrifice. We're building our home together. We're working towards the same goals. We're trying our best to become better people. We're trying to raise our kids, and in the process, I'm going to get uncomfortable, you're going to get uncomfortable, I'm going to get upset one day, you're going to get upset, and throughout that process, there's going to be a certain bond that's found that is very strong. Especially when you make this bond founded upon something greater, seeking Allah's pleasure, or something like that, a greater purpose in life. Love is cultivated. What does that mean? I'm not born loving you, Ibrahim, I love you, I love you, but there's reasons why I love you. And just as I love you, I could love someone else. Some people have a fairy tale image of what love is supposed to be, love at first sight, finding a spark. It's supposed to do something inside me and somehow change my world, right? It's supposed to change my world. And, my knight in shining armor came. That's something very, very, shallow. I'll just say that. It's something very shallow. No, love is something you build. And that's how I just described it. So, what are we talking about when we say emotional attachment? What causes emotional attachment? When I start sharing my feelings excessively with another person. When we start talking excessively. When we just talk for the sake of talking and chilling and going out to places and building memories with each other and so on and so forth. Doing this before the issue is official has devastating results. I'm not telling you this from the realm of theory. Ask anyone, mashallah, we have some mental health professionals, we have people who have a lot of experience with marriages and people and their relationships, and they'll all tell you the same thing. When people build emotional attachments before it's time to do that, when things don't work out, it causes devastation. You don't need to have that level of emotional connection to know if someone works with you or not, because again, you're looking for ballpark compatibility. All right, what is this person trying to do? Oh, this person is career driven and their field is XYZ, and I am the complete opposite. Mathalan, and I just don't find myself meshing with this person at all. Okay, then we have obviously a red flag there. This person is looking for a very traditional home, and I'm the furthest thing from being traditional. Oh, then we have an obvious red flag there. Right? These are how you find out if this is something you could get into, because hey, it takes 5 minutes to become acquainted with somebody, but it takes a lifetime to get to know them. You're never going to know this person enough for you to know if this marriage is going to be utterly successful. You think anyone goes into marriage knowing that it'll never end in divorce? There's always risk involved with marriage. So it would take an utter fool to think that, hey, you know what? This is the right equation and this marriage will never fail. No, because there's too many variables in life that can't ever decide that for you. You don't know what's going to happen in a year or 2 years or 5, right? So there's always a risk involved. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't look for building an emotional attachment to someone whom you haven't agreed to marry yet. because it could hurt you and hurt you really bad, right? And too many stories to emphasize this. What's needed in those initial stages? Serious conversations. Yeah, I need to know this person's personality. I'm not saying it's going to be a business meeting. It's not going to be a business meeting. I didn't say there can't be any exchange of gifts or any social setting or relaxed family gathering or interaction. Yeah, there's going to be those, but what happens, and sometimes I got too many situations that are like this, is that there's no engagement even. No engagement. Forget about kitb kitab. No engagement. And the brother and sister are talking every single day like they're husband and wife. What do you think is going to happen after you do that for 6 months? You think you're going to want to just walk away from this? You think it's going to be easy for you to just put an X on this person out of your mind? Of course not. It could derail you for years. And in fact, sometimes it could cause certain boundaries to be crossed that you're going to wish were never crossed. Right? So that's what I meant by attachment. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, so the second part, you mentioned a little bit of it. In terms of during the engagement, how do you interact and talk with your fiancé in a way that is acceptable and halal? You said social gatherings, gifts, having serious conversations. Where do we draw the line?
It's a real big gray area. That's what I say. And inshallah, we're supposed to have an official second talk about marriage, inshallah, sometime in the near future. However, this is my general advice for people is don't make the engagement period too long or the kitb kitab too long, because it makes things overly complicated. It makes them too complicated. If you're going to have an engagement and you're going to be seeing each other or talking with each other multiple times a week, then I don't know how you could possibly keep the conversation halal if you stay engaged for 6 months and then kitb kitab for 2 years or 3 years or مش عارف ايه. I don't know how you're going to be able to avoid certain things. It doesn't make any sense. So my advice is try to keep that engagement period as short as you can, and if you're going to keep it longer, interact less. If you're going to keep it, if we have to keep the khutubah for 1 year مثلا, that means you should be talking like twice a month. People are going to think, well, where are you from, the Stone Age? I was just joking in that last one. So don't have your engagement for a year. That's the whole point. Have it for shorter. If you're going to have your kitb kitab for a little longer time, the kitb kitab could be a little bit longer than the engagement, but it definitely should not be, you shouldn't have engagement for a year and then a kitb kitab for a year or two, ولا مش عارف ايه. Because the kitb kitab period has its own complications. Kitb kitab, we start thinking we're husband and wife. Or sometimes the guy might think I'm the husband, but the wife might not necessarily think she's the wife. And the husband tries to impose himself as though he's the husband, and then it leads to certain problems. Or you know what? Husband wants to be husband, but then he realizes, oh, the father's in the middle. Oh, can I call her? No. Can I give her a phone? No. Can I كذا مش عارف ايه, and then it starts causing other types of problems where you have to deal with certain complicated dynamics, because again, we don't have a choice with how our families are. Sometimes you might have a complicated guy, complicated girl, complicated parents, complicated mother, complicated father, and the whole point of this is, am I ready for marriage or not? If the answer is no, then focus on something else. I get people, I'm 18 years old and I'm looking to get my engagement now so I could get married when I'm 22 or 23. I'm a sheikh. Focus on your life, and then when you're 22 or 23, get married. Okay? Engagement for 4 years so we could do it in halal. I don't know if they're going to do it in halal. But anyway, point is, that's something to consider, because each stage has its own challenges. Allahu a'lam. And there's so much more to say. Inshallah, we'll have a separate lecture on this in the near future.
Tamam. The next question, if you keep trying but you're struggling to purify your heart, what advice do you have there?
If you keep trying but you're struggling to purify your heart, what do you do there?
Yeah, so I mean the question reads, what if you are struggling to purify your heart but keep failing?
I would say you're an average believer. That's what we're all in, There's 3 types of nufus, by the way. There's 3 stages, I should say, for the nafs. There's a nafs al-mutma'inna, the tranquil soul. Then there is a nafs al-ammara bis-su', and that's something we should all steer clear of. This is a nafs that is lowly, debased, inclined towards wicked things. When wicked things happen, I get excited. I get excited when I'm around people who remind me of sinfulness. Then that's an awful thing to have. Nafs al-ammara bis-su'. It's dragging me into haram, right? And then there is a nafs al-lawwama. This is a nafs that is torn in between. Sometimes the good wins and sometimes the bad wins. And when the bad wins, I feel a great sense of regret. Why did I do this? Oh man, I'm so regretful. I want to repent from this. So these are stages. Why? Because you're not going to find a nafs that's always mutma'inna. Last 10 nights of Ramadan come, MashaAllah. Khushu', qiyam, and tahajjud, and dua. Hajj, MashaAllah. Crying my eyes out. Right? Mathalan. And then other parts of the year, I'm going to find that goes away. So you'll find that you're not going to be able to be on that high all the time. Sometimes it's going to go down a bit. And that's why the believer, this is average. If I think that I've ridden, mashallah, I don't have any diseases. I'm a clean person. No diseases in my heart. Not an ounce of arrogance. Not an ounce of showing off. Not an ounce of envy. I'm a person whose my heart is rife with diseases. That's utterly disgusting for a person to think that they have no disease in their heart. That's our perspective. Because there's always, when the person thinks that they're free of diseases, that's when there's actually diseases. Right? Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek. Another question. What are some things we can do to give da'wah? How much ilm should we have to be able to give it? Should we study other religions? Is it okay to study other religions?
When can we give da'wah? The Prophet ﷺ said it. بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Convey upon me even if it's just a verse. And sometimes you don't need to speak to give da'wah, by the way. Sometimes you give da'wah by your actions. Be a good person. In fact, I think that this is one of the most effective forms of da'wah. When you live by what you speak about. When you actually give it through your behavior, it just lends that much more confidence in what you say you believe in. Sometimes people, when they get into this da'wah mode, hey, I'm going to put my da'wah cap on, I'm going to start giving people da'wah all the time, they become very lectury. They go back to their homes and they start, sometimes happens, new multazim, young guy, very, very zealous, he grows out his beard, wears the thawb, goes back and tells his father everything that he's doing wrong, and then he goes to his mother, and then he goes to his siblings, oh, by the way, this is haram, and by the way, did you know that you're doing this the wrong way and you need to correct that? This lectury attitude towards religion is absolutely toxic. It's bad. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. Don't let the shaitan make you fall into that I need to somehow make sure I talk endlessly about certain concepts. So anyway, when do I know if I can give da'wah? When do I know? Whatever knowledge I have, I share it with people. But I need to verify and make sure that I'm sharing the right stuff. And sometimes, you know what? Let me shut my mouth and just share things through my actions. Maybe that's a good way to start. And then the other part of the question was? What was it?
Please hold.
Please hold.
How much ilm should we have to be able to give it?
Oh, so we answered that.
Should we study other religions?
Oh, should you study other religions? Can you study other religions? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I would caution, how much have you studied from your own religion? Before you decide to study other religions, make sure you at least know the basics and fundamentals about your own religion. Because sometimes it could be just, the shaitan giving his deceptions. You know what? If I don't know the basics about what I'm supposed to do as a Muslim, then maybe I should start there. Let me start there, and then I'll branch out to other religions. But studying other religions could be very, very beneficial. Yeah.
Okay.
At the right stage.
Fiqhi question. Does wudu count with any type of makeup on the face, eyes, foundation, eyeliner, etc.? If not, how does one repent from salahs prayed in that state?
No, anything that would create a barrier from the water reaching wherever it needs to go would discount that type of wudu. And that would include nail polish, even if the whole breathable, quote-unquote, halal nail polish thing, that's not sufficient, because even if it's breathable, it doesn't mean that the water is going to flow underneath the nail polish. It's not going to. It's just breathable. It's not going to get to wherever it needs to go. And you need to wash this limb, not simply make it moist. So anyway, anything, and that would include for guys as well, anything that would create a barrier from the water getting to where it needs to go. Like for example, you put some Vaseline on, the petroleum jelly, that stuff is very thick, it creates a barrier. So you should not put that on right before you want to make wudu, because it's going to make the water sleek, it's going to make it very sleek, and the water is not going to actually penetrate, because it creates a layer there. And how should you repent? If you didn't know, khalas, it's okay. Now you know, start a new page and build there from now. Inshallah, hopefully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will excuse you for your ignorance of this.
Is it haram to sell vapes or cigarettes?
This would stem from whether it's haram to smoke it. Because if it's haram for me to use it for myself, then it's going to be haram for me to sell it. Just like wine and alcohol. Is it haram for me to consume wine and alcohol? Yes, then it's haram for me to sell it. It's not allowed for me to sell that. Is it haram for me to consume marijuana? Absolutely. Then it would be haram for me to sell marijuana. And of course, is it for medical purposes or مش the people in this field, they know what's batikh and what's actual medical purpose, okay? I know I keep on saying batikh is watermelon, if you don't know, by the way. And what I mean by that is nonsense, because maybe you could say 70% of 80% of the people who claim medicinal marijuana, it's absolute nonsense. They have a problem in the head, they don't really have actual illness I'm just joking. So anyway, getting to the point here, getting back to what we were saying, if it's haram for me to consume it, it's haram for me to sell it. Vaping, is it haram for me to consume it? How do I know? It goes back to a certain barometer and a certain gauge of what is haram. If it's mutahaqqiq al-darar, absolutely 100% harmful, that the science and the people in the field tell us that this is detrimental to your health, then we're going to say it's haram. If it has a likelihood of leading to medical problems, then we're going to say it's makruh. If it's 50-50, then it's going to be in the realm of mubah. Now that is going to. So now, what's the science say about vaping? I know that there are clear harms for it. I know it's a new thing, and they're still exploring it. But the logic that I just said was used for cigarettes, and that's why cigarettes are absolutely haram. This whole fatwa about them being makruh was coming at a time when people did not actually know the harms of smoking. But now it's a categorical consensus thing that smoking is absolutely haram. Would vaping be exactly like smoking or not? Let's confirm what the medical community says in that regard. But I'll tell you, without even knowing that, is it something mustakhbath? Is it something that the believer through his wara' and taqwa should avoid? The answer is yes. That's why if someone chooses to go in a vaping business and have a smoke shop, it's a field that, even if we're going to suppose that it's not mutahaqqiq al-darar, absolute harm, within certain regards, then we're going to say working in that type of field is going to make you part of a certain culture that isn't really good for your Islam and your Iman. Right? You don't really see people standing in the first line in salah vaping. It's going to bring you around different type of people, right? And not to say that everyone who vapes is a bad person, but it's a culture that doesn't necessarily bring you closer to Allah. And that's what we're trying to say. So that's what I would say for that. I'm not going to tell you an absolute haram without getting a categorical, even though I know that there's some serious harms that I'm hearing about in terms of vaping, what it could do to your health. I can't tell you unequivocally if there's a categorical harm about vaping just like it is about cigarettes. Allah alam, I don't know. Not a doctor.
This is a question with not much context. Can you disown your child in court? I don't know if this means before 18 or after, if they mean emancipate or not. There's no context here, but it has the most likes.
It has the most likes?
Subhanallah, I know.
Can you disown your child in court?
Yeah, so I mean,
Or like all the parents here, like, واقفين في الطابور ولا إيه?
I guess there's two options here. If your child is still a child versus if he's an adult and maybe there's some fallout.
What does it mean to disown them? What does it mean to disown them? That means that they're not my son biologically or daughter biologically, then of course it's not possible. It's not possible to do this. You know, if you mean by that you negate them being linked with you as that you being part of their ancestral tree, then of course that's not possible. If they're from you biologically, then that's one thing. But there's something that else, like if the person disowns a child that says this is not my child, like menfi, where you would have what we call li'an, you know, when the husband accuses the wife of being unfaithful and having the child through an outside relationship, that's something else completely. But I'm sure that's not what this person means. Disown your child in the sense that you're saying this out of anger and disapproval of them, then of course you're going to, you have your right, but the Prophet ﷺ advises you, don't do that. You know, if you mean by disowning your child, that's it, my son chose to get married to, under certain circumstances, and khalas mishibni, he's not my son anymore. I'm not going to deal with him, I'm not going to give him an open ear, khalas. That's it, I'm done. If that's what you mean, then the Prophet ﷺ warned us, don't make dua against your children. لا تدعوا على أنفسكم ولا تدعوا على أولادكم. You don't make dua against your nafs. Some people, they do this. May Allah ruin me if this is true. Don't say that. Allah khalik, don't say this. Even if you know it's not true, don't make yourself used to making dua against yourself or others. That's not something positive. And then when it comes to your children, وَلَا تَدْعُوا عَلَى أَوْلَادِكُمْ, don't make dua against your children. Because if you do that, then you're shooting yourself in the leg. If something happens to them, that motherly instinct, that fatherly instinct is going to kick in, and you're going to be the one who's going to regret it most. So that's the advice that the Prophet ﷺ gives in that type of situation, because you don't know when your prayer will be answered. So if I'm completely missing the mark on this one, send a follow-up question and explain what you want.
So it's possible maybe this is touching on حقوق الأبناء على الآباء and أباء على الأبناء. So what if my child is still my child and, you know, has not hit bulugh or is not 18? Can I let go of my obligations towards this child?
Can you, okay, so
like I
if
have
we
emancipated him from court.
No, you're still gonna, even if the court rules, like say if you know, unfortunately this happens with divorce, like the mother or the father doesn't want anything to do with the kid anymore. Khalas, I'm gonna act as though I don't have one kid or two kids or three kids. I'm gonna completely erase them from the record. No, these children have a right on me. I don't care what the court rules. Me not giving them their rights is me doing something haram. You know, what rights are we talking about? Financial rights, emotional rights, spiritual rights. These are their rights. These are their God-given rights. Any court can emancipate them or whatever, do whatever they want. Now, if someone's going to deny me the opportunity, like sometimes it happens with divorces, where the father or the mother will seek full custody, and they want to completely cut out the other side from having anything to do with the kids. This person is doing something absolutely haram. This person is oppressing the other side. Because you cannot cut off a child from their parent unless, and I'll underline unless the circumstance is verified to absolutely be warranted by people who are khubara and experts. You need to consult religious leadership, and you need to consult mental health counselors, unless this person's presence is absolutely detrimental to this person. If that's what's ruled, then by all means, I can't decide that by myself. No one should decide that by themselves though. Oh, I'm the mother and I know that the father is bad for the kids, so I'm just going to do whatever I can to X out on him. Don't do that. No, seek people's advice. If this person's abusive, a narcissist, an oppressive person, someone who might exploit, because we get some of these cases, it would seem so bizarre, like who would transgress against their child in sometimes even in a sexual manner. There are multiple cases like this. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, that's like so inappropriate to even ponder the thought of, but it happens. It happens. So if that's the type of situation, then I would say that would be the only exception. But as a default, it would be absolutely oppressive for one side to try to cut the other side out from dealing with the children. And I can't just completely disavow them, just because I don't want them in my life because they remind me of this guy or that girl. Wallahu a'lam.
Barakallahu feek. Two business questions. We'll start with the first one. Is drop shipping haram?
Questions here? Okay. Is drop shipping haram? Drop shipping is not haram. Drop shipping is basically a manner of transacting with you being licensed by certain individuals to sell on their behalf. You don't own the merchandise when you're selling it, but you find people to buy it at a certain price that's pre-agreed to with, or that's arranged beforehand, and you are merely the middle person. In fact, even fulfillment comes from the actual manufacturer, mathalan, or the actual owner of the product. So they'll ship it to wherever it needs to go. I'm just acting as a middle person. Do I fall under the prohibition of selling that which I don't own? No, I don't. No, I don't, because I'm a licensed vendor, mathalan, or a seller, or a licensed salesperson on behalf of this company or that. So there's nothing wrong with drop shipping. Allahu a'lam.
And then one more. Is buying a tax lien haram? Some say it involves interest, while others say it's a return on investment.
Is buying a tax lien, you said?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
This is a follow-up to an earlier question in regards to what are the roles and responsibilities of a husband and wife towards each other. So, Sheikh, I think you spoke before about more from a financial perspective. This is just a more broader question on roles and responsibilities.
The roles and responsibilities of spouses towards each other?
Yes.
That's a good lecture topic, man. It's not a good... so that's like such a vast question. I would be, I would encourage being more specific. Is there a specific right you're asking about? So in general, if you want to know where to find these rights out, a good place to start is some of the books about marriage. And there's a good number of books out there in English about marriage. Among them is actually the book of our beloved Shaykh Qatanani. He has a specific book about, having, I don't know the exact name, but you'll find it in the bookstore. It's about the journey of marriage. And in it is a section on the rights of the husband and a section on the rights of the wife. That's where you would find that type. Or another good book is a book called A Blissful Marriage by Ikram and Rida Bashir. I think they're the authors of that book. There's another good book about marriage. It's called Before You Tie the Knot. And I think the sister's name is Salma Abu Ghadiri, I think her name is. And the Imam who is with her is Imam Muhammad Majid from Virginia. It's a really good book. Before You Tie the Knot, and put Imam Muhammad Majid, it will definitely come up for you on Amazon. So that's where you'd find the answer to this type of question. In general, what else would I say in this regard? There are financial rights, there are emotional rights, there are spiritual rights, and there's so many hadith that emphasize all of these. And there's, when it comes to the khidmah and the bayt and the house responsibilities, a lot of this is left to mutual agreement and culture. Now, is it, like for example, is it wajib upon women to cook for their husbands and do the laundry? This is something that's left to culture. Islam doesn't spell this out. You'll find certain cultures that say it's absolutely blasphemous if the husband has to do laundry. Mathalan, some cultures would say this, and it's a blasphemy. What do you mean? I have to do work at home? In other cultures, no. Actually, it should be 50-50. In fact, in some other cultures, you'll find that, even in cooking, the husband has to share. Mathalan, this is left to culture. It's not left. Islam hasn't spelled out everything for the lives of people. There's a realm of mubah that's allowed for them to come to mutual agreement about, and. But it's important to note what the Prophet ﷺ did. The Prophet ﷺ was someone who was very involved in his household. And كان يخصف نعله ويرقع ثوبه. The Prophet ويرقع ثوبه. Sorry, the Prophet ﷺ would stitch his clothing, would fix his shoes and his foot gear. The Prophet ﷺ was in the constant service of his family. That's the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, this is the best and most ideal example where the people share in the responsibilities of the household. However, is there something to say that if a husband and wife agree that everything at home, the wife's going to take care of it, and everything outside, the husband's going to take care of it, if they agree to this and they're happy with it, is this something haram? No, of course not. It's left to their mutual consent. As long as there's no oppression involved or some excessively imposing approach to some of these things, then it's not haram or makruh or anything. This is left to taradi. Yeah.
Barakallah feek. I think we need to end in a few minutes, so
yes.
Take one more question. When your 5-year-old asks you, who made Allah, how do you answer?
Who made Allah?
Yes.
So if your 5-year-old asks you this type of question, I would try to redirect it. Sometimes politicians are really good at this, and people like when they're doing press releases and there's a lot of questions from the press coming to them. The smartest person is the one who says doesn't say I refuse to answer or make a big scene about it. The smarter person is the one who makes as though he's actually answering the question, but he actually created a different question by himself. That's the smarter person. So when they ask you who made Allah, I would try to redirect them without actually making them feel that, oh, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest, He did this and He did that, and start making them think about the greater creations of the heavens and the earth. I would say that's a better approach. Don't tell them, no, don't ask that question. Oh no, it's haram to ask that question. Oh no, because sometimes if you bring their attention to something, you might make it more of a big deal in their eyes than it actually is. Because they're asking this question just because of their simplicity, their innocence as children. So don't make it an issue, just redirect it. Their attention to Allah's magnificence and so on and so forth. In terms of teaching children about the basics of Aqeedah and Iman, I need to get the name for you guys, but there's this effort of making the Ihya, you guys know, revival of the teachings of the faith, Ihya Ulum ad-Din, to making it kid-friendly. It's actually a full curriculum, and the whole book is all for the different age brackets. I think the age starts, I don't know, maybe at like 5 or something like that, 6 years old, and it's a full curriculum onward. So this actually needs a lot of thought, and there was a lot of thought into by people who are experts in the field, like child psychology and teachers and so on and so forth. I would look it up online. Ihya Ulum ad-Din for children. Look it up. I think it has its own website. I don't know if anyone here knows the name of it, but it's out there. And I think you'd find a lot of solutions to these types of aqeedah questions, that are age suitable. Inshallah. Yeah, sure, we can close with that. جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. العصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالصبر. Inshallah, we'll see you guys next week. جزاكم الله خير for attending, and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about next week بإذن الله تعالى. Please don't forget to take some of the sweets and coffee and tea as you're socializing. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم.